Solomon was the wealthiest man in the ancient world. He did not pray for money. He asked for one thing, and wealth followed as the consequence. I am the millionaire priest, and I have spent 20 years documenting what Solomon knew. 2 books. The Confession Code. The 7 financial sins no priest will name from the pulpit, and the priest's ledger, the 40-year method for reading wealth before it arrives. One for where you are, one for where you are going. Both available now through the link in the description and the pinned comment below. I want to ask you something about the financial situation you are currently in. Not the numbers, the quality of it, the texture of it. Whether it feels like a season of building or a season of waiting. Whether the promise you have been believing for feels closer or further than it did 12 months ago. Whether the gap between where you are and where you believe you are called to be has been narrowing, or whether it seems, despite your faithfulness, despite your prayer, despite the genuine effort you are putting in, to remain stubbornly the same. Because I want to suggest to you, and I want to make this case from the most detailed financial biography in the entire Old Testament, that what you are describing may not be a problem. It may be a test, a specific, designed, intentionally calibrated financial test that God places in the life of every person He is preparing for the promise He has spoken over them. And the reason I want to make this case carefully and completely is that the person who does not know they are in a test will almost certainly fail it, not from lack of faith, not from lack of effort, but from lack of recognition. Because a test you do not recognize as a test produces in you a completely different response than a test you understand clearly. The person who does not know they are being tested responds to the pressure with anxiety, with the search for a way out, with the specific financial decisions that the pressure itself generates, decisions that almost always move them away from rather than through the test. And the person who recognizes the test, who can say with full honesty, this is a designed season, this difficulty has a purpose, this pressure is not an obstacle to the promise, but the path through which the promise arrives, that person responds differently. They hold, they trust, they make the decisions that the test requires rather than the decisions that the anxiety demands. And on the other side of the test, the promise. Welcome, I am the millionaire priest, and today we are going inside the financial biography of Abraham, the man the New Testament calls the father of faith, and finding the 5 tests God gave him before the promise was delivered. Before I give you the 5 tests, I want to establish something foundational about the pattern itself, because the pattern of test before promise is not unique to Abraham. It runs through the entire biblical narrative with a consistency that can only be described as structural. Joseph was tested for 13 years, from the pit to the prison, before the palace. David was anointed king as a teenager, and then spent approximately 15 years as a fugitive before the throne. Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness of Midian, before God spoke from the burning bush. The disciples spent 3 years in the uncertainty of following someone who kept saying things they did not fully understand, before Pentecost made it clear. The pattern is not occasional. It is the pattern, and it is financially specific. The tests in every one of these stories are almost always expressed in the economic dimension of life. In provision, in resources, in the gap between what exists and what has been promised, in the pressure of circumstances that seem to contradict the word that was spoken. God tests in the financial register, because the financial register is the dimension of life where trust is most concretely and most tangibly expressed. It is easy to trust God in the abstract. It is much harder to trust Him when the invoice is due and the account is empty and the promise has not yet arrived. Now, before I take you into Abraham's 5 specific tests, I want to pause here because what I am about to describe connects directly to something I want you to have access to. In 20 years of pastoral ministry, I have documented the specific ways people fail financial tests, the specific financial patterns that cause sincere, faithful, genuinely believing people to step out of a test that was about to produce a promise, just before the promise arrived. I have written 2 books from this work. The first is The Confession Code, the 7 financial sins no priest will name from the pulpit. One of those 7 sins is the sin of premature exit, the specific failure of stepping out of a test one decision too early, of seeking the relief of resolution before the test has finished doing what it was designed to do. The Confession Code is available right now through the link in the description and the pinned comment. I also have a second book, The Priest's Ledger, which I will return to before this teaching ends. Both are available through the same link. Now, let us go into Abraham's 5 financial tests. The first test. Solomon was the wealthiest man in the ancient world. He did not pray for money. He asked for one thing, and wealth followed as the consequence. I am the millionaire priest, and I have spent 20 years documenting what Solomon knew. 2 books. The Confession Code, the 7 financial sins no priest will name from the pulpit, and The Priest's Ledger, the 40-year method for reading wealth before it arrives. One for where you are, one for where you are going. Both available now through the link in the description and the pinned comment below. The test is the test of the unknown destination. Genesis 12:1. The Lord had said to Abram, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will show you." Future tense, destination withheld. Abraham had a word and no address. He had a promise and no map. He had a command to release the visible security, everything he had built and accumulated and belonged to in Ur of the Chaldeans, and move towards something he could not yet see. This is the first financial test, and it is the one that most people never pass because they never begin it. The visible security of the current situation, the income that is familiar even if insufficient, the position that is known even if limiting, the financial arrangement that is comfortable even if it is not where the promise is located, holds them in Ur indefinitely. They are waiting for the destination to be revealed before they take the step. And the test is specifically designed to require the step before the revelation. The faith of Abraham was not the faith of someone who had complete information and chose to act on it. It was the faith of someone who had a word and moved. Hebrews 11:8 is explicit about this. By faith, Abraham obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. He did not know. He went anyway. And the financial test of the unknown destination is asking the same question of you that it asked of Abraham. Will you move toward the promise before you can see it clearly, releasing the visible security of the current arrangement in response to the word rather than in response to the map? The second test is the test of immediate difficulty upon arrival. This is the one that most people find most destabilizing, because it seems to contradict the promise rather than confirm it. Genesis 12:10. Now there was a famine in the land. Abram had left everything and followed the word to the promised land. He arrived, and the first thing waiting for him in the promised land was a famine, the immediate, practical, financial contradiction of the promise in the very territory the promise pointed him toward. And here is what this test reveals. The presence of difficulty after you have followed the word is not evidence that the word was wrong. It is evidence that the test is real. The test requires you to hold the promise in the face of the apparent contradiction, to remain in the land or to return to it, rather than permanently relocating to Egypt, because the circumstances in the place of promise feel harder than the circumstances in the place of familiarity. This is the test of the person who followed God's direction into a new financial venture, a new career, a new path, and found that the first months or years of following the direction were harder than remaining where they were. The famine in the promised land is not a sign that the land is wrong. It is the second test, The third test is the test of generosity before advantage. Genesis 13. Abraham and his nephew Lot have both accumulated enough livestock and servants that the land can no longer support them together. The herdsmen are fighting. A separation is necessary. And Abraham, the older man, the patriarch, the one who had received the promise and whose position in the relationship gave him the right to choose first, gives Lot first choice. Whatever direction you choose, I will take the other. He releases the advantage. He gives away the right that his position entitled him to hold. He chooses the financial posture of generosity over the financial posture of advantage. And immediately after Lot takes the better land, the well-watered plains of Jordan, God speaks to Abraham in verses 14 through 17 with the most comprehensive expansion of the promise he had yet received. Lift up your eyes and look from the place where you are, northward and southward and eastward and westward, for all the land that you see I will give to you and to your offspring forever. The promise expanded in the moment of released advantage. The test of generosity before advantage asks whether you will give someone else the first choice when your position entitles you to take it for yourself. And the financial testimony of Abraham's response is that the release of the advantage positioned him to receive the fullness of the promise rather than a portion of it. The fourth test is the test of the tainted offer. Genesis 14. Abraham has just rescued his nephew Lot from the kings who took him captive. He has returned victorious with Lot and all the people and possessions that had been taken. And the king of Sodom makes him an offer. Give me the people and keep the goods for yourself. The financial spoils of a significant military victory, offered to Abraham by a king whose city was, as every careful reader of Genesis knows, on the verge of the judgment that would destroy it, and Abraham refuses. Genesis 14:22 through 23. I have raised my hand to the Lord, God Most High, Creator of heaven and earth, and have taken an oath that I will accept nothing belonging to you, not even a thread or the strap of a sandal, so that you will never be able to say, I made Abram rich. He refuses the money because of what accepting it would mean about the source of his wealth. He refuses to allow anyone to take the credit that belongs to God for the provision in his life. And the statement he makes, so that you will never be able to say, I made Abram rich, is one of the most financially sophisticated statements in the entire patriarchal narrative. Abraham understood that the source of the credit matters as much as the money itself, that wealth received from a compromised source carries the orientation of that source with it, that the financial testimony of his life, the witness that his abundance was built on covenant faithfulness rather than political alliance, was worth more than the immediate gain the tainted offer represented. The test of the tainted offer asks whether you will refuse financial benefit that would compromise the source of credit in your financial life, whether you will hold the line on where your provision comes from, even when the immediate gain is real and available and nobody would blame you for taking it. I want to pause here because the fourth test is the one that connects most directly to what I have developed in my second book. The Priest's Ledger, the 40-year method for reading wealth before it arrives. Abraham's financial biography spans approximately a century of documented decisions, and reading it carefully, reading the arc of where the tests led and what the accumulation of correct responses produced across decades, is precisely the kind of long-view financial analysis that most people never do, because they are managing their financial life quarter by quarter rather than decade by decade. The Priest's Ledger develops the 40-year framework for reading your own financial arc before you have lived it, for making the decisions now that the full picture, seen from the end, confirms as the right ones. It is available now through the link in the description and the pinned comment. Both books, The Confession Code and The Priest's Ledger, are there for you. The fifth test, The final and most complete is the test of the offered Isaac. Genesis 22. God says to Abraham, "Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering." Isaac is not simply Abraham's beloved child. Isaac is the promise. He is the specific, miraculous, covenant-fulfilling arrival of everything Abraham had waited 25 years to receive. He is the proof that the word God spoke over Abraham was real and true and deliverable. And now God is asking Abraham to release him, not the preliminary security of not the advantage of the first choice of land, not the military spoils of a recovered battle, the promise itself, the specific, irreplaceable manifestation of everything God had spoken. And Abraham goes. Genesis 22:3. Early the next morning, Abraham got up and loaded his donkey. He did not wait. He did not negotiate. He did not ask for a different arrangement. He got up the next morning and went. And on the mountain, in the moment of maximum obedience, the angel stops him. A ram appears in the thicket. And God speaks the most comprehensive financial and covenant promise in the entire narrative. "I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as the sand on the seashore. Because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will bless you, and your descendants will take possession of the gates of their enemies." The full, final, absolute promise. Because of this, because you did not withhold. The test of the offered Isaac is the test of releasing the promise itself, of being willing to give back to God the very thing he gave you as the confirmation of his covenant. And it is the test that, passed, unlocks the fullness that the previous 4 tests were leading toward. Now I want to help you identify which of these 5 tests you are currently in. Because the practical value of this teaching is not historical interest in Abraham's biography. It is the recognition of your own test, the specific form the testing season is taking in your financial life right now, so that you can respond to it with the quality of decision that the test is designed to produce, rather than the anxiety-driven decision that the unrecognized test generates. You are in the first test, the unknown destination. If you have received a clear sense of financial direction that requires you to release the visible security of your current arrangement before the new destination is fully revealed. The question is not whether the step is comfortable. The question is whether the word is clear. If it is clear, go. You are in the second test, the famine in the promised land. If you have followed God's financial direction faithfully and arrived in the right place only to find conditions harder than you expected, the question is whether you hold in the land of promise during the famine or permanently relocate back to Egypt. The famine is the test, not the refutation. You are in the third test, generosity before advantage. If there is a specific financial situation in front of you right now, where your position entitles you to take the first choice, but generosity would give it away, the question is whether you take the advantage or the open hand. You are in the fourth test, the tainted offer. If there is financial benefit available to you right now that would require you to accept help from a source that would eventually take the credit that belongs to God. The question is whether the immediate gain is worth the long-term compromise of testimony. You are in the fifth test, the offered Isaac. If the thing God is asking you to release is not the preliminary or the secondary, but the promise itself, the specific blessing you received as the confirmation of the covenant. The question is whether you trust the one who gave it enough to release it when asked. I want to close with this. Abraham passed all 5 tests. Not perfectly. His biography contains detours and failures that the text does not obscure, but he passed the tests that were decisive. And the financial result, the inheritance, the nation, the covenant blessing that is still being distributed 3,000 years later, is the consequence of the past tests, not of some arbitrary divine favoritism. The promise on the other side of the test is proportional to what the test required. The fullness of Genesis 22:17, as numerous as the stars and the sand, is the promise that follows the willingness to release even the promise itself. And the person who recognizes their current season as a test, who identifies which of the 5 they are in and makes the specific decision that test requires, is the person who is about to arrive at the promise that the test was designed to produce. Leave a comment below. Tell me which of the 5 tests you are currently in. You do not have to explain it fully. Just name it. The first, the second, the third, the fourth, or the 5th. This community is built on honest conversations, and I read everyone. If you are new here, welcome to the Millionaire Priest. Subscribe and hit the bell. Every week we go this deep at the place where faith and finances meet, and there is much more coming. You are probably in the test. Name it, make the right decision, and trust that the promise is on the other side of it, as it has always been, for every person who recognized the test for what it was. Amen.